Welcome, everyone, to Rutgers at the Voice of College Football. I'm here with my fantastic co-host, Gabriel Pickup. We've got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to talk about a few things, including the three obstacles Rutgers must overcome in 2025 to have a successful season. But before we start, I want to wish a happy Memorial Day to everyone and to our veterans and thank them for their service.
Yes.
Okay, so as we said last week, from now on, we'll be starting out, as always, with pick updates. So, Gabe, let's start the first segment with your updates. Take it away.
The second edition of Pick Updates. First off, I also want to wish everyone a happy Memorial Day and remember that it's bigger than a day off. Thank you to all the brave men and women who have fought or are fighting for our country, some of whom have paid the ultimate sacrifice. And Adam and I wouldn't be able to make our smart-ass remarks about this game of college football without you guys. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you to our servicemen and women.
Yes. Now, moving on to the second edition of Pick Updates. This one is a little bit older news, but we didn't cover it last week, and I feel that it's important to cover it this week. New president of Rutgers University, William F. Tate IV. He begins his tenure July 1st. Former president at LSU from 2021 onward. Now, he leaned heavily into athletics, and one quote, Adam, that really stuck with me this past introductionary ceremony is he said, "I didn't grow up in this participation trophy world. You come in second place, you put it in your pocket, go home and work on being first." I think that is the attitude that really helps Rutgers in the long term.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome, President Tate, to the Scarlet Knights and to New Jersey. You're exactly the type of president that we want to keep building the culture that Coach Schiano has built in his first stint and is building in his second stint. We don't want participation trophies. We don't want close losses. We don't want to be runner-ups. We don't want to be in the rate bowl. We want to be competing for national championships. And I can tell you, okay, having lived in New Orleans for 4 years, LSU is all about winning.
Yeah.
If you don't win a national title, it's considered an unsuccessful season. So this president brings that mindset, brings that mentality, brings that culture to complement what Coach Schiano's doing, bodes well for Rutgers football and Rutgers University.
Yes. Now, obviously, as president, education is first. Austin, my man, I am not in the fake outside, as you can hear my neighbors, and they are having themselves a very lovely Memorial Day. But education comes first, right? But second, if you go down to LSU, you see that second is clearly athletics. And when it comes to athletics, LSU might be the most well-rounded athletic program in the nation. And obviously they've been well-rounded for many, many years, but Tate helped elevate that. And that's sort of what I see happening here. We talked about a few weeks ago, did Schiano give an ultimatum to the athletic director? Little did we know the athletic director is a vacant position currently, so he must have went to the president, if anything. And if he goes to Tate and says, I need this, I need that, Tate will say why, and when he hears his explanation, he will say, I'm in. That's the kind of man this guy is, and we are very lucky to have him.
Yeah, when you look at the pedigree, LSU, that's all you need to know, okay? If anybody's ever been down to Death Valley and been in that stadium, it's like an earthquake. That's how loud it is. And LSU is all about winning national championships in football and beyond. So when he comes in there, Schiano's not going to really have to pitch much to him. I think it's going to be the president pitching something to Schiano, saying, Coach, not good enough. We got to compete for national championships. And I think that Schiano's going to meet that and greet that with a smile. And I think this president's going to have an indirect effect on our recruiting that's going to show up big. And I think this upward trajectory into the stratosphere called the college football playoff begins in that magical 2026 season.
I think it begins this year. Look, it's difficult because this year, right, we can go anywhere from 3-9 to 9-3. But I think with this year being a transition year of sorts, well, obviously for guys like Callie McManus, DT, it's a last hurrah. We need to win now. But for most, it's a transition year, which wasn't quite the case last year. So I believe that we're building a culture that's going to be relevant and stay long-term, even past 2026.
Yeah, and you know what I love about the culture? The culture reflects the state of New Jersey. New Jersey's a gritty state. People work hard. They want to win. They're tough. They persevere. They overcome adversity, and they never give up.
Yeah.
And that's what Rutgers is building. And as you see from a pretty strong transfer portal, a recruiting class that was in the low 30s, we're now starting to get not only the resources, but the talent to supplement the culture that we're building. And when that comes together, it's going to coalesce into what I think is going to be a team that surprisingly competes in the Big Ten. And like you said, could be.
Yeah. I mean, we have some positions that are amongst the top at the Big Ten. So with this presidential hire, I expect some more depth on this team, which we've lacked in past years, and some more guys that are red shirts that can excel later on. So another speaking of commit.
Well, before you do that, Gabe, I was thinking, congratulations to President Tate. And President Tate, we'd love to welcome you onto the show as soon as you're available to discuss your vision for Rutgers University, your vision for the football program, and how you see your vision playing out over the next several years. We look forward to meeting with you.
Absolutely. Now, there is a guy that committed that we talked about last week. I thought there was a good chance he would commit. You weren't quite as optimistic, but we got him. We got him. Mr. Jared Smith, 2026 four-star offensive lineman. He has committed to the Scarlet Knights. His final four was Rutgers, Georgia, Georgia Tech, and Auburn. Now, this tells me a few things. It tells me he wants to make an immediate impact, and it tells me that he wants to build a college legacy. I can see him possibly staying here all 4 years. And the fact that we were in his final four, that's why I was optimistic, because usually guys that have us clamped in with Georgia, Auburn, Georgia Tech to a slightly lesser degree, you think, oh, we don't have a chance. But then you also think, if we didn't have a chance, we would have been ruled out already. And Austin has a great question here, by the way. Is Ethan still disinvited?
As it stands now, Ethan Kaliakmanis remains uninvited on this show for failing to respond to several invitations, number one. But most importantly, the true reason for the disinvitation or the revocation of the invitation is his failure to play in the spring game. Unacceptable, Ethan. However, AJ Surace, you're welcome on the show anytime.
Oh, man. Yeah, so I just had to bring that up.
Sam?
I just had to bring that disinvitation point up because I was wondering myself.
Yeah, but hey, Ethan, we support you. We love you. We know someday you'll be on the show, but the most important thing is for you to have a great year, to be a great team player, and to propel Rutgers to elite status, and to prepare yourself someday for maybe playing on Sunday.
So what did you think about my points with Mr. Jared Smith? Do you think I'm on the right track? Do you think he stays here 4 years? Do you think he wants to make that immediate impact, or is he a redshirt freshman? Because I saw on a scouting report that they said he could be a redshirt freshman, but then I also saw that he'll be a, quote, starter in a Power 4 conference. So let's see what happens.
I think he's going to start as a freshman, and I think getting him over Georgia and Auburn particularly speaks volumes about Rutgers, and I'll tell you why. Georgia has a tradition that Rutgers can't match. The same holds true for Auburn, and to a lesser extent, Georgia Tech. So there must have been something unique that Rutgers offered that they didn't. And it wasn't the money, certainly. I think it was Coach Schiano and the culture. So if they're building a message and a brand that's resonating with people who would normally go to the Georgias and the Auburns, that means they're doing something right, and that bodes well for things to come. And I bet you President Tate was a large part of those discussions.
And you know what else I think? I think that I lost my train of thought, but I think that it's going to be a big year. And there was one other thing, but I completely forgot as soon as I said that for some reason.
Well, I do see that exploring with Ben and Sam. I feel bad because what a wonderful show there over at Oregon at the Voice of College Football. But I feel bad because this year, sadly, the Ducks will not be quacking, and the Ducks will die in a cold Piscataway fall afternoon. Okay, but we're going to welcome them to Shea Stadium. And Shea Stadium is not quiet. CEG Washington last year. But we're going to welcome him. We're going to welcome Spaz, and we're going to have some fun with the Ducks as they do not quack, as Ethan Kaliakmanis goes off for 3 touchdowns and Antoine Raymond 150 yards on the ground.
Yes. And I just remembered as you were making those bold predictions, the other key impact for bringing in Jared Smith, I believe, was offensive line coach Pat Flaherty, who has
Uh-huh.
worked in the NFL alongside Shiano and on his own, and he is one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. And I believe that he was also a key separator from Georgia, Georgia Tech, and Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very rare that somebody who is now Smith is from what state does he reside?
It's crazy. He went to high school in Woodland High School in Stockbridge, Georgia.
Stockbridge, Georgia.
Yeah.
And he turned down Kirby Smart, turned down Auburn for Greg Schiano. So there's something that they're doing. There's something in this recruitment recipe that's different and serving something else that these players are attracted to. That's why.
Great sign. We brought him to New Jersey.
What'd you say?
We brought him up from Georgia to New Jersey.
Yeah, and you know what? I currently live in Georgia because I teach at a college here. You Georgians, you got to go check out North Jersey. You got to go check out New York City. It's a special place.
Not very fun to drive in.
No, but you know what? It's worth the sacrifice. And I'll tell you, you're going to have a great time. He's going to have a great time at Rutgers. He's going to start from day one. Yeah. And it's like I said several shows ago. Once you get those 4 stars, once you get a couple of 5 stars, it creates that domino effect where other players say, well, it's not that big of a deal if I go to Rutgers because he just turned down Georgia and Auburn. Yeah. So I think that this is, again, building the culture and building the foundation that will build upon itself ultimately and be self-sustaining.
It is, because you know why I believe – I actually agree with you on that, because it reminds me of Team USA basketball, right? We were not sending out our best guys. But then who was it that started it? I want to say Jimmy Butler maybe or Jaylen Brown, one of them. Right. They say, hey, you know what? I'm going to play some basketball for Team USA, and I'm going to recruit some guys. All of a sudden, we get Joel Embiid to represent Team USA when he has been a citizen here for maybe 5-6 years. We get LeBron, who's on the brink of retirement. Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, also on the brink of retirement. And that kind of, to me, resonates with this team. How you think, okay, these guys from New Jersey, we're not getting enough guys from New Jersey to stay in Jersey. But then you look at this, we're getting Jared Smith from Georgia. We just got a guy from Illinois last week. I think as long as we can get enough guys out of state, it might turn into a bandwagon, and more guys out of state might want to come to New Jersey.
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly what we're building. We're building a culture where this is the first time in my years of following Rutgers football where the new president is the former president of LSU.
It's you.
We got a player who just turned down Georgia, Auburn, and Georgia Tech.
Last time anything like that has happened. I mean, we got a transfer from Penn State, too.
Yeah, and we've got, a transfer portal that was ranked in the top 10 and a recruiting class that was ranked, I think, 33 or 34. So with this momentum, Coach Schiano has to feel reinvigorated. And as we look towards the future is quite bright.
Quite bright like this damn sun that's in my eyes. But
well, you deserve it for sneaking outside. Are your neighbors upset?
They're not upset, but this just proves that I am, in fact, outside. And I
probably think you're talking to yourself.
I am going to be on this side of the table for the rest of the show.
Oh, well, Gabe, thank Gabe for giving us a tour of his home. Gabe, always good to have a segment that isn't involving football.
Yeah, a little home renovation. Yeah, this is a little better. All right. Now, we're on a slight slant here, but it's okay. We're going to work with it. There's a few more things I wanted to say about Mr. Jared Smith. Now, 6'5", 335, absolute beast. Played left tackle last year, but is projected to play as a guard for us. Like I said, starter potential in Power 4 conference, which obviously Big Ten is one of those. And here's another interesting thing, right? A little fun fact of sorts outside of football. He qualified for regionals in discus and shot put last year.
Really?
It's really cool to me. That shows he's not just powerful, but he's also got some agility.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. So you got somebody with the size, with the agility. Now the question is, what's his speed like? Any indication of what his 40 is?
What'd you say?
Any indication of what his 40 is? Do you know what his 40 is?
I can do some research really quickly. Let me see.
Because
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's what we're going to be needing on the offensive line. We need fast offensive linemen who can move laterally and also are a cohesive unit as part of a larger team. Rutgers needs to have that team mindset this year. Yeah, Jason, how you doing? Definitely big recruiting weekends are coming up. And we're getting closer and closer to what now? Only about 3.5 months away?
Yep. If Jackson were here, he would be able to tell you the exact amount of days, but his 40 was not good. Now, I don't know when this was updated, but it says 508.
That's not bad for an offensive line.
Yep. It says 19th percentile, though.
Oh, well, maybe
unless they mean it in reverse, unless they mean he's like only 19% of people are better than him. I don't think that's what they mean, though.
I think it means that 81% of people are better, but the question is, what's the disparity? Maybe the top 10% is like 5 or like 4.97. So maybe the disparity is not that big.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if he's doing discus and shot put, that is technically part of track and field.
Balance. So yeah.
I mean, he does have cardio, even if he's not the fastest. He's agile, he's mobile, quick on his feet at least, because those are the factors you need to go to regionals in discus and shot put.
And we're going to see if we can get him on the show. We'd love to welcome him.
We'd love to have him on the show.
And just for those of you who are watching, Gabe and I, in a few short weeks, we're going to start having players on almost every week and a few surprises for you. And when the regular season starts, we're not just going to have players from Rutgers on. We're going to have possibly, in fact, probably a player from the opposing team each week to talk about the upcoming game, along with some guest hosts that you will find absolutely outstanding.
And it's going to be very emotional. So everybody, you're welcome to come on, voice your frustrations, your excitement, whatever the week may call for. Hopefully a little more excitement than frustration. We're definitely going to be talking a little more sentimentally than logically once those games come about. Hopefully we can keep it together for those good games, talk about what we're doing well, but in the bad games, it might not be so logical, Adam.
Yeah, well, there might be a little bit of an elevated voice, but I don't know. I think this year is going to be a bit different. I don't think we're going to see a game like last year against Illinois. I don't think we're going to see a game like Wisconsin or Nebraska, but we shall see. And I will be announcing in the coming weeks when the invitation to Ethan Kaliakmanis has been reinstated.
I can
having him on the show.
I can feel it coming. Now, is this true, what Austin says?
My 40 is a 2.7. Does he mean like 2.7 minutes? I used to run a 4.85 40 when I was in high school. Austin never got above that. But I will say this to the audience. We'll make one surprise announcement. One of the quarterbacks on the roster at Rutgers will be appearing on this show in a relatively short period of time. Stay tuned.
Absolutely. Top 25 team will fall this year on the banks. Now, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. It seems a little bit like riddle-filled, if you wouldn't mind elaborating. If you're saying we have a chance at being a top 25 team, I would love to believe that. I don't necessarily see us being too far from it, but that's definitely a great goal to have, especially in the Big Ten, because if you're, you could be like 7, maybe 8th ranked in the Big Ten and still crack into the top 25. That's really how deep this conference is.
I could be wrong. I interpreted him saying that a top 25 team is going to fall to us this year.
Oh, see, that would be, yeah, I think you're right about that. And that would be the first time that happens in like 10, 15 years. I saw our.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And I am going to say it like I have said it before. That top 25 team, maybe there'll be more than one. That top 25 team is going to be our good friend Drew Aller and Penn State. Penn State will fall in Piscataway when Drew Aller, leading Penn State to the winning touchdown in the final minute, throws it to the wrong team.
You're seeing a little deja vu there? See.
Yes. Well, I think that I don't think Penn State's going to be nearly as good because I don't think that their offense is going to be effective against strong defenses.
And we have a defense that has potential to be strong. It's certainly got a lot to prove. It would probably be our biggest question mark going into the year.
Well, I think for Rutgers, the key is going to be on defense. They've got a great bunch of transfers on the defensive line. They've got great depth now in the secondary, with Jet Elad and, of course, Penn State, what was his name, Cam Miller, right? No. Yeah. So here is the thing.
Be Henderson.
It's the key is going to be, can they come together as a team and as a unit? And that, again, goes back to my mentality of this team has to have a culture that is so team-oriented where everybody is playing not for themselves but for the team. And if they can come together, it could be special. With Alchemist, yes, everyone is picking Penn State so far. They will be good, but I do not see them beating Ohio State.
Yeah, it's crazy because a lot of people are saying Penn State is the best in the Big Ten. I just don't see how Ohio State, even with all their losses, is second or third. I really think Ohio State is best in the Big Ten for the next 5 to 10 years because that culture is ridiculous.
I don't see Penn State going to Columbus and winning.
No. When you say picking Penn State, do you mean picking off Penn State? Because that I could see that happening a lot too.
Well, no, I think he's saying everyone's picking Penn State to win the national title.
The Natty. I think the Natty is going to come down to Texas versus Ohio. I'm not sure how the playoff bracket would work. It comes down to seeding, right? Not conference this year. I know they change it every year, basically.
Yeah, I think Texas. Everyone's high on Texas. My dark horse this year is the Crimson Tide. I think they've got some serious talent.
I think it's going to come down to Texas, Ohio State. But you know what? I want to digress for a second because this comment right here made me really think of something. I want to go through our year, our opponents, and see who you think, Adam, will be a top 25 team by the time we're facing them.
Let's do it. Alchemist, thanks for everyone thanks for the good comments.
Of course.
Very good discussion. So let's do it.
Yeah, so obviously you look at the first three, Miami, Ohio, Norfolk State, not happening. The real first competitor for being a top 25 squad that we could beat is Iowa. Now, Iowa's defense, it's one of the best in the nation. Iowa's offense, their receivers are doo-doo, and that's putting it in a very polite manner. No offense to any receiver individually. I saw a ranking, though, right, that Iowa's best receiver is the worst best receiver in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you know what? I want to address Iowa football right now. What a well-respected program historically, but when you have a problem on your team, in your organization, you fix it. Iowa, for years, has really not shown, at least outwardly, that much of a commitment to building a powerful offense. And I think that it might be a reflection of their mindset that they want to play traditional Big Ten football and win with defense, but that's not going to work.
No.
Okay, in this era. So I get confused about why year after year, maybe it's just that they are trying, but people don't want to go there because of their anemic offenses historically. I'm not sure, but I don't see Iowa being a top 25 team for the same reasons that they've struggled historically, which is, they've had some great years, but historically their weakness has been on offense, and I think that's their downfall this year. But it is going to be Rutgers' biggest game of the year, and it's going to dictate the trajectory of how this team goes. Iowa this year was Nebraska last year.
Okay.
We got to change it.
I was kind of thinking, do you think Iowa is kind of the Chicago Bears of college football?
No, I don't know what NFL.
I mean, right.
But that's not a bad analogy. I think the problem with Iowa is what people don't often say is that their defense isn't that good. They're very good.
Yeah.
But, when they have a very good defense that is, very sound. Okay. They don't make a lot of mistakes. But
it's system based too. Like I don't really know too many individuals on the defense. It's just the system.
Yeah, and when you have the defense on the field for an excessive period of time, eventually it's going to break down. A perfect example was a few years ago when Michigan played them in the Big Ten title game. Okay, what was it, like 10, 13-0 at the half? Well, it was eventually 33-0. or something like that, because the defense can't sustain when it's on the field too long. We can have an anemic offense.
Yeah.
So I think Iowa is going to be a seven win team this year.
7. Okay. So you
But
think there's a chance they fall flat, like really flat?
there's a chance they fall flat. Could they win 8? Yes. Do I think they win 9? No. So I would say 7, 8 maybe.
I think they have the same ceiling we do, but they definitely have a higher floor than we do. That's what I would say. I would say their ceiling is the same, 9 wins, but their floor is probably like 5.
Right. And so in that game against Rutgers, it's going to come down to a lot of things we talked about last week, those intangibles, time of possession, turnovers, fourth down conversions. And it's going to be the little things that determine who wins. And it's going to show us, does Rutgers have the polish? Because Rutgers needs polish, meaning they need to win the turnover margin. They need to win time of possession because they're not talented enough to compete against the Ohio States and the Oregons unless they play as perfect as possible. We're going to see if they can do that.
It's true.
Iowa.
Austin, see, I would agree with this, but it's not necessarily Iowa's quarterback's fault per se, because at least the Jets, you have like Garrett Wilson's, Brandon Marshall's, historically speaking, Wayne Shrebitz, if you want to go way back. Like, the Jets have had good receivers. The quarterbacks have underperformed. Iowa's quarterbacks never really stood a chance. And Alchemist, you're right. They do have 3 new guys in the backfield, and it could be very run heavy. I know their offensive line is pretty solid too. I just don't know if the passing game would be enough to suffice. Moving on to the week following, Minnesota. It's interesting, right? They actually, according to a lot of Big Ten content creators, are projected to beat us. I don't see that happening. I think we beat them, and I think we can beat them pretty handily. I don't know what I've said in weeks past. Maybe I have had us losing to them, but as of right now, I think like 27-14 can really be solidified. So I don't think they're a top 25 team, but I could be sleeping on them. I'm not sure.
For us to have a year that we're proud of, we 100% have to beat Iowa, and we 100% have to beat PJ Fleck and the Golden Gophers. That game worries me.
You think so?
Minnesota's a good team. They're well coached, and Rutgers will be just coming off of a very tough game against the Hawkeyes.
You don't think Ethan leaving them sent them back 10 years like Cleveland with LeBron?
No. I don't. With all due respect to Ethan, but Ethan was a different quarterback at that time.
He was
improved so much, but
he was Jets Geno Smith, and now he's sort of more Seahawks Geno Smith.
I agree, and I think going on the road after you've just played a tough game against Iowa, this is going to be the second test of whether Rutgers, A, can play consistently good football, B, play consistently polished football and win those turnover battles, fourth down conversions, time of possession, field position. Can they do that consistently? So this is going to be a test for Rutgers, coming off of a high of a win over Iowa. If that happens, can you sustain it? And that's another question mark going into the season.
See, I'm kind of on the other side of that. I think we lose to Iowa, and I think the key is, can we bounce back? And that's sort of the obstacle if you want to sort of delve this into the segment you have underneath us here. I think the biggest obstacle we're going to have this year is the mental toughness to bounce back after losses, because there will be at least 3 losses, and we have to have the courage and the forgetfulness with the moving forward of, can we bounce back? And I think that with this game against Minnesota, we should be favored. I think that based on the first 3 weeks, hopefully we're 3-0 after those 3 weeks. And if that's the case and we lose a close one against Iowa, we should be favored, and I think we can hold forth. And I don't think Minnesota is quite that top 25 team. So I so far this year have us maintaining that top 25 losing streak, because I do think Iowa can be top 25, but I don't think Minnesota will be.
Do you know why I think that we're going to beat Iowa? I think we're going to beat Iowa for the same reason that Alabama beat Georgia last year. When Alabama came into that game against Georgia, that was their Super Bowl. They were so up for that game, and in the first half really dominated Georgia, lucky to survive the game. But then after that, they had some stunning losses, including to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And didn't sustain it. But I think the mindset of Rutgers is going to be similar to the mindset of Alabama coming into that Georgia game. Same thing with the Iowa game. Then the question is going to be, look, The week after Alabama beat Georgia, they lost to Vanderbilt. Question's going to be Rutgers. If you beat Iowa, is Minnesota going to be your Vanderbilt, or are you going to take it to the next level?
Okay, I see. I hear what you're saying, but
yeah, you great segue. Thanks again for Gabe's excellent updates and a great segue into our second segment, which is the 3 obstacles Rutgers must overcome in 2025 to have a successful season and to build that culture into a championship culture. So, what's your first obstacle that Rutgers has to overcome in 2025?
yeah, like I said, just being able to come back from losses and look at film, see what you did wrong, but not necessarily hold a mental barrier that this is going to happen again, right? You're a team that is looking to improve, build upon a culture, and move forward, not look back and dwell on the past, but learn from it. That's what I think is really the main obstacle moving forward. I don't know. Do you necessarily agree with that? I'm sure you agree with it, but is it like on your top obstacles? Is like coming
it's
back?
It's not among my top 3, but it certainly could have been, and I do agree with you. The first obstacle that I listed was you absolutely cannot lose a game that you should win, because there are going to be a few likely losses on the schedule. Last year, they should not have lost to Illinois.
No.
Arguably, they should not have lost to Nebraska. I mean, that's a 1-touchdown game. Illinois, last play or second to last play of the game.
Don't even get me started on those Cornhuskers.
They can't have any of those losses this year because we're looking probably at losses to Oregon, probably Penn State, in all honesty, and in Columbus, Ohio State. One of those games really affects the season in such a substantial way. And it goes back to what I was saying about polish and winning those intangible factors, time of possession, turnovers, 4th down conversions, getting 4 to 5 yards on first down 65% of the time. And, turnovers, of course. So you cannot have that happen, Rutgers. That is a remnant of the past that cannot be a part of the future.
Yeah, and my second obstacle here is kind of an obvious one, but it's the schedule. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, and, just to list off a few more teams, we said Iowa has the potential to be top 25. Minnesota has a kind of a reaching chance. Washington definitely could be. Oregon will be. Illinois definitely could be. Maryland has a chance. Ohio State and Penn State definitely will be. And last year, we only faced, I don't even remember. We didn't face we did not face Penn State. We did not face Ohio State. And we didn't face I don't think we faced Oregon, right?
We didn't face Oregon.
So those are like 3 of the toughest schools in the nation.
Yeah, and what happened last year, the favorable schedule that we had last year was offset by the injuries. 8 starters out for the year. I mean, when I look at the second, schedule certainly is an obstacle. The second obstacle for me is what I mentioned briefly before, and that's sustainability. How many times have we seen a team play above their heads and defeat a top-ranked team, and then the week after suffer letdown? I remember the Catholics versus Convicts game, I think it was. No. It was, I believe, 1988 when Notre Dame played, I think it was Florida State, Charlie Ward, and they won.
Charlie Ward, Knicks legend.
Yeah, and then the next week, guess who they lost to? Boston College.
Yeah.
Alabama beats Georgia and then loses to Vanderbilt.
Who did Dame lose to in the regular season last year? It was someone crazy.
They lost. I believe they lost to Northern Illinois.
It was, Northern Illinois.
Yeah. Okay, Jason. Oh, you corrected me. Thank you so much. It was 1993 Notre Dame versus Florida State. Okay, thank you. So I think, again, this goes back to what we were talking about, which is so many things have to come together for Rutgers football for them to have the kind of year that we hope for. Can it happen? Yes. It begins with not losing a game that you should win and also making sure that you sustain the level of competitiveness, the mindset to go through what's going to be a difficult schedule.
Yeah. So that's your number 2 also is difficult schedule. Yeah. I don't know how we do it. There's too many 50-50 games going on this year. like, if you want to average it out to 50-50 games, obviously give or take like 5-10%. Iowa, Minnesota, Washington, Illinois, Maryland. That's 5 games that are like totally 50-50.
Well, Illinois, I think, and Washington are going to be tough. But, it comes down to leadership. There's got to be leaders on that team. Seniors, Ethan Kaliakmanis, DT Sheffield, really that set the tone for these younger players, because if they can sustain it with that hunger, with a culture that says every single day you got to make the right choices and decisions and hold yourself to a standard, okay, accountability, and a focus on team, being part of a team where everybody really has the same vision to be a national championship contender. That, I think, is the kind of culture and chemistry that allows you to be successful. But we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I hear you. And my number three obstacle would be, and it's kind of obvious, right? See, we lose Robert Longerbeam, we get Cam Miller, we lose Holland Pierce, we get like 3 more guys, like Ty Needham switches left tackle, so on and so forth. But we lose Manangai, and we don't get anyone quite on his level. So to me, that's the third biggest obstacle, is the run game. It's not going to be as productive as last year. Running back by committee, it could still work, but it needs to be. It's an obstacle, no doubt, because we're losing talent. But we can still be productive because of the identity switch. But it's just another obstacle.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. I think for me, the third obstacle, and you may be surprised by this, in-game coaching. I think that's really something that bothered me a bit last year. For example, when it was, I believe, 4th and 7 against Illinois with about 12 seconds. Why are you blitzing? Why are you blitzing?
Can you give me another example? I've heard that one too many times.
The fake field goal attempt against Nebraska.
Right, fair enough. That one's a little more, first and goal, not converting 3 times.
First and goal, not converting 3 times. So there were some questionable calls in moments that really had a major impact on the game. So that's going to be my third obstacle. And Jason O says Shano teams usually have a good culture. I totally agree with that. I think Shano builds a great culture. And he says they rarely never stay healthy, though. And that's true, too. And I wonder why. Why do you think that is?
I think it might be the Tom Thibodeau effect. And that's what it comes down to. Obviously, the Knicks switched things up last night. And hopefully this Rutgers team moving forward can rely on its depth more, especially at the receiver and running backs. But it's the fact that we haven't had the depth to back up our sort of frail starting roster, our depth chart roster. And this year we have the potential, at least on offense, possibly on the front 7, to switch around, get some guys on the field, off the field, and possibly, when guys do get injured, sub them in and have a semi-healthy year. But I do agree, Jason. Overall, that is true. I'm just hoping that they say the definition of insanity is expecting the same thing over and over again and being proven wrong every time. I just hope that I'm not insane, and this is the one year that I'm proven to be sane after all.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jason's absolutely right. And I think you're absolutely right, too, that depth is a huge issue. The only other thing that concerns me, though, is the number of injuries that they had, particularly earlier on in the season. That I can't necessarily attribute to depth. And I wonder, it's hard to know. Was it just bad luck? I don't know, because like Jason said, there consistently are more injuries than we would normally expect. So is it conditioning?
Yeah, he's not necessarily going out there and hitting guys on the leg with a baseball bat.
Is it conditioning, or is it the fact that, hey, maybe the talent disparity is such that, like you said, when you don't have that much depth and, I don't know. It's a tough call.
Here's another theory. Maybe it's because these guys that we're starting, most of whom are upperclassmen, they're redshirted and then they're at the back of the bench, and then all of a sudden they're starting every play.
Could be.
I mean, you're still practicing the same amount. And in high school, every single one of these guys were a superstar.
Well, yeah, that's true. And look, that's another obstacle because of all the things, there's about 9 things that have to come together. And like we said, the small things, the turnover battle, field position, etc., not losing a game you should win, depth. They got to stay away from injuries because they're not Ohio State. It's
No.
not next man up at Rutgers, and maybe it will be someday. So that's going to be another issue.
Cue the Nick Saban quote about next man up. Why don't you practice next man up? Because if it's next man up, you're screwed.
Yeah. Wait, Jason just has another comment here. Works his teams really hard, even in season. A psycho at times, and his teams always wear down over the course of the season. Well, Jason, it seems like you know the team extremely well, and if that's true, that's definitely a concern. I know Shiano's old school; he's tough, and that's all good. But you also have to balance that with playing, practicing smart, not just hard.
I mean, guys are moving faster. They're stronger now. They're more athletic. So maybe the same reliance on your starting 5, starting 4, and then back 3 or 3-4, whatever. Maybe you can't rely on it as much because times have changed and guys are more athletic, so they're tougher to guard. And then if you do the math, it translates to more injuries.
Well, I suspect too that Shiano probably learned a lot from last year. The injuries were so prolific that, I mean, nothing was more. It was never more apparent how injuries hurt us than in that USC game, because there were times at which we were competitive, but then ultimately just overwhelmed. The physicality of USC and the talent, and those injuries really highlighted the impact that they had on their ability to compete. So hopefully, Coach Shiano was like, we can't have this again.
I'm just happy that we dodged USC the Caleb Williams year.
Yeah.
That would have been a disaster.
And Jason says his style works for sending guys to the NFL, which he always has. That's true. But not great for his teams finishing the season strong. Also very true. And I think his style, it has another great benefit, which is you're taking players that might not otherwise be as competitive in the Big Ten as they are. So in that regard, there's a benefit to it. But there is a drawback when you don't have that depth and you have a long season, and that's why you see, what happened last season.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, that ends our second segment. Jason and everyone else, thanks for the comments. As always, we have our good friend Sports Talk with Austin joining the show. Austin, thanks so much for coming on. Always great to speak with you. How's it going, my friend?
We might be having the same issue
as always. It's a great time.
We can hear you. We just can't bring you up.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
It's good as long as y'all can hear me and the people can hear me out there. I can preach my gospel. But how are you all today? Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day. So what's on your mind?
Gabe, Gabe, I wanted to bring up your point about the Jets real fast, and I'll get to this because I got some things y'all might be interested to hear about your all's topic. So I've been thinking long and hard about this while I've been waiting. I came up with 3 good ones. But to the Jets, Gabe, you're right. The Jets, in Iowa, the reason why I gave them a comparison was for one simple reason. The Jets have always had a great defense. Even when they were terrible and couldn't win 5 games, they always had a defense. The defense was always holding it down. That was never their problem. But their quarterback play, ever since – who would you say was your last really great quarterback? Joe Namath?
Aaron Rodgers. But if you want to talk about wins,
Cutler?
probably Chad Pennington.
Yeah.
That's fair, and that's the reason why I bring that comparison up, because they're kind of the same thing in a way. But the one thing, to your point though, Gabe, is the Jets have had great receivers. They just don't know how to use them properly. Unlike Iowa, who, no offense to any Iowa fans, their receivers are more of run-blocking receivers.
Yeah, I believe Alchemist may or may not be an Iowa fan because he said "we" when referring to Iowa. So, Mr. Alchemist, Austin means no offense to you. Go ahead.
Yes. No offense whatsoever. Like, I love Iowa, got family in Iowa, beautiful place, beautiful place. But as far as the receiving core, not too hot. But to this though, to this topic, so I know this may get under Adam's skin, but I think the three things Rutgers must overcome. The number one thing is bad play calling and bad scheming, because there was a lot of times where Rutgers this last year, especially that Nebraska game where they ran the ball 4 times and could not get it in. I understand sometimes when it's your bread and butter and you think you're the tougher team, you're going to punch it in. But there has to be a point in time where Shiano or someone looks at that play sheet and says, okay, we've got 3 more down. Why don't we try play action? Why don't we try something different just to see if we can't get Nebraska off this line bunch? Spread them out. Do something. That's one of my biggest things. I don't know if y'all agree or disagree.
It's challenging because Monangai is supposed to be able to convert on those because of the player he is.
Yeah, I think though that if you look at the context, you got Monangai running the ball against a defense that has 8, 9 in the box, and honestly, in that Nebraska game, I thought their defensive line really dominated our offensive line, from a physicality standpoint. So, given the context of, the situation he was in, I think it was less likely that he was going to get in, and then we were just too predictable. But here's the flip side to that. I don't know if any other play call would have worked. I think that Shiano was thinking this is our best chance to get in. So I'm open to what we could have done, but I typically don't like to run, try to get around the edge when you're near the goal line. Look what happened when Texas tried that against Ohio State last year, for example. And throwing the ball in that situation is risky.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is. Maybe that's the best they had. And if that's true, that's an area, another obstacle that's going to need to be addressed for this year.
And I want to say this too. And Gabe, cover your ears. The Illinois game, another bad example of bad play calling and bad scheme. Like, I know you all haven't discussed much, but I feel like that's going to be Iowa's biggest key. Can they scheme it up right in the right moments? Because here's the thing, Adam. I understand where you're coming from. Why are you blitzing? But here's the thing. I'll always say, if you all out blitz, you better have the faster guys. And unfortunately for Rutgers, sometimes they aren't always the fastest, or the quarterback's just that much better. Because if you all out blitz, the plan is to flush them out and hope to get them off their throw. But if you got a quarterback that's mobile or could throw on the run like an Aaron Rodgers, then you might not want to do that. Like Luke Altmaier, that was one of the best throws I've seen him make. In that scenario, that was bad. But we've seen teams do that, and it works to perfection. On the flip side, I don't know if you can see where I'm coming from or not.
I totally agree with you. I think you make a great point. And you know what that play reminded me of? That play reminded me of a few years ago when the Jets were playing the Raiders. I don't know if you remember that.
Stop bringing these crazy scenarios up.
Last play of the game, I think the Raiders were on the 50-yard line, and Jets called an all-out blitz, and I think it was a bomb to Henry Ruggs for the touchdown win.
Jason, by the way, I believe Testaverde when he was on the Jets wasn't quite the prime Testaverde that I never saw him play, but I believe he was sort of still the interception machine Testaverde. But continue. I'll turn my ears out for this Jets.
Pretty good, but not great.
Yeah.
It's okay, Gabe. It's okay. But to that point, though, Adam, I think that's the biggest thing y'all have to overcome is bad play calling and bad scheme at the wrong time. Now, it can also compound at the wrong time, too. Like at the second quarter, if Rutgers does an all-out blitz and you get torched, it could put someone up 21-0, and then like that, there goes the game plan. It's not just in the crucial moments. It's throughout the game.
The flip side to it, too, is, hey, I'm not a huge fan of rushing 3 and dropping 8 because I mean, there's a chance you're going to give the quarterback, an eternity to throw. But that's why I think Gabe and I have been saying, for many weeks, that front four needs to disrupt the quarterback. And that's going to be another critical factor in Rutgers' success.
And here's the thing. My number two and my number two biggest thing is health. Like both of you said, you and Gabe, I agree with you. But we've also seen where when players get injured, then the backups come in and the backups do better. We've seen that. Who remembers the year the Broncos went to the Super Bowl? Brock Osweiler won a majority of those games when Peyton went down and got benched.
Yeah, Peyton.
So there is that possibility too.
Well, it's funny when you mention injuries. There's one point I think that
Go for it, Gabe.
Is important, and one of those points is this: we have to look at the areas on this team where injuries would have the most impact. We've got 3 very credible running backs this year. So C.J. Campbell, Jashawn, and Antoine Raymond. I think Raymond's probably close to number one. Maybe it's Campbell, Raymond, and Benjamin. But if one of them gets hurt, we still have 2 talented running backs. I don't see Ethan getting hurt. I think where the injuries are going to be critically important to avoid is in the secondary.
I mean, as long as Ethan knows how to slide correctly, I think he'll be okay. He's been very durable for us. It's just
I think he
scrambles as much as he does. He just needs to slide correctly.
Yeah, it's going to be on the defensive side where we have to avoid the injuries.
By the way, Austin, I believe that your microphone is a little delayed, but as long as you're cool, we're cool.
Okay. Can you all still hear me fine?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. I want to make sure. But, I agree with you, Adam. In the Big Ten, if your defensive line or your secondary, because let's just say, I don't want to put this bad juju out there, Cam Miller, if he goes down the second game of the year, who's going to come in and fill that spot? Does Rutgers have the ability to fill that in his absence?
No.
Because
Jacoby Henderson. He's the guy
go
close
ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, he's the only guy close.
We cannot have an injury to Cam
And
Miller.
that's one of the things, too. It's
Yeah, you're absolutely
Go ahead,
right.
Adam.
No, if we lose Cam Miller, that's going to have a very negative impact. And if we lose Jet Elod or any of those defensive backs, and Jason makes another good point that losing Toure last year really did hurt us. I mean, we were pretty at the linebacker position. We were not strong.
Losing Toure this year is going to hurt us even more. But we still have Jabome, so who knows?
But yeah, you're right, Austin. Good point.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say this too, guys. Before I get on to my third point, the thing with Rutgers is, y'all mentioned about the big commit y'all got between Georgia and Auburn. That kind of bleeds into my third point is playing within and being who you are. That's sometimes the biggest thing teams can overcome. And the fact that they got that big recruit from Georgia and Auburn, and the fact that they were able to persuade him from Georgia and Auburn, that's a big, big win. But does that make Rutgers a little full of themselves? Does that make Rutgers full of themselves, though? That could be something they have to overcome, because let's just say you become overconfident after beating Iowa. Then you start to think, we're invincible, and then that's when the bad stuff starts to happen. So playing within yourself, staying grounded, staying humble.
It's unfortunate, but playing lax is almost inevitable when it comes to getting ahead of yourself. It happens to every team. I've seen it with my New York Knicks. I've seen it with my New York Mets. In terms of football, we saw it with Alabama last year. We saw it with Notre Dame against Ohio State in that first half of the championship game. We saw it with Texas. They almost lost to Arizona State. So it's inevitable for good teams to relax. But the thing is, we have to assert ourselves, rather, as a good team. And I don't think that getting Smith is necessarily going to be like the be-all, end-all and be the point where we get cocky. I think possibly it could Jason, that's funny.
Jason's right.
I think Iowa's a very good team, and they're anywhere from top 5 to top 10 in the Big Ten. But I don't think that would be the point where we necessarily say, this is like we're inevitably going to win out the year. Like we know the whole year. Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State are still ahead of us. So with that being said, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that, Austin, is that, people talk a lot of the time about you have to learn how to handle failure, learn lessons from failure. Very true. But you also have to learn how to handle success. Because complacency is the biggest enemy to success, and that often happens when you experience success. Hopefully Rutgers, that won't happen to Rutgers. The second thing is this, though. You said Rutgers has to be who they are, play to their identity. So my question is, what is their identity? Because when I think of Iowa, I know what their identity is. When I think of Michigan, I know what their identity is. When I think of Florida, I know what their identity is. Well, potentially. What's Rutgers' identity?
I think it's different this year. And that might be a rhetorical question because we don't know at this point, but it's in terms of offense, it's going to have to be going deep in the depth chart. We have 4 or 5 receivers that can play like wide receiver 2 out there, and between DT, Duff, and Strong, they could all be wide receiver 1. And it's just a matter of we have to go deep. We have to play like, almost like Aaron Rodgers with the Packers back when he was in his prime, like in the early 2010s, where you have 6 different receivers that can be wide receiver 1 any week. Sort of like we see with Jordan Love in the Packers now. That's sort of the identity we have to take on offense. And in terms of defense, it really just depends on the scheme.
I think also, when I think of Schiano, ideally, I think Schiano is kind of like the Bill Parcells school of football. I think what he wants to do is play amount football, run it on the ground, play action, and win with great defense. I don't think he's been able to do that. So I think our identity has been shifting year to year based on our talent. So this year, I don't know what that identity will be. So, we'll see very quickly when Iowa comes to Piscataway.
And I want to add to this. Let me cue a Nick Saban quote for you guys. When Nick Saban, every year his team changed. And I feel like Greg Schiano is the same type of coach. It doesn't matter if you have all the 5 stars, if you have 0 stars, as Adam likes to call them. Your identity is what it's always been and what has been successful. It doesn't matter if you've got the greatest quarterback of all time. If Rutgers is built on running the football, we're going to run that football. We're going to smash it in your face, and you're going to like it. You're going to taste your own blood, as they like to say. And that's kind of what Nick Saban embodied. He didn't care if he had all the good players or he had all the walk-ons. His mentality was our defense is going to be great. We're going to have good quarterback play, and we're going to have a really good offense when the defense has down days. And I feel like Rutgers is going to have that same mentality. We're going to run the football, and Ethan is going to do Ethan things, not turn the football over, and our defense is going to get better, and we're going to win some games.
Right. I think that's a great point. And this reminds me of the year 1990 when the Giants played the Bills in the Super Bowl. The Bills were a pretty heavy favorite. But how did the Giants win that game? I think 20-19.
Missed field goal.
Yeah, it was a missed field goal by Norwood, but their defense shut down the Bills, and their offense, I believe it was with O.J. Anderson, really pounded the Bills' defense and really got them tired on the field. That's the formula that allowed them to beat a more talented team, and that's what I think Schiano wants to do. Whether he'll be able to do it this year, I think, is a question that I don't know the answer to yet.
Yeah, see, my problem is, right, Austin, you said that the identity is he gives it to the best players and says, we're going to run it down your neck when we have the best running back, throw it. The thing is, right, going back to the 2006 year, ever since then, whenever Schiano's been at Rutgers, we haven't had a pass-first offense. So this might be the first year that we have a chance to do that. But my problem is this. I could totally see this being a year where Schiano says, screw our deep wide receiver core, screw our 3-man attack rushing. Let's just feed CJ Campbell the ball every time and see what happens. And I really hope that's not the case, but I could see him playing like or scheming like that simply because with Ray Rice and Manungai, and other guys, like it just seems like we had Kenny Britt, but he wasn't the wide receiver one, or he wasn't weapon number one at least. I just don't know if we utilize our wide receivers as much as we should.
Well, the thing is this though too, Gabe. Unlike those years, we've got 3 very good running backs. So these running backs are going to be fresh going into the fourth quarter. So I think it enables us to potentially do that. And with a quarterback like Ethan, I think he can be, I don't want to say an efficient game manager, something more than that, but he doesn't have to be a Cam Ward. So I think he's somewhere in the middle will allow them to have a pretty balanced running and passing attack, and that could bode well for us this year.
The thing is, right, we had Raymond and Benjamin last year.
Yeah, but I think that they had a couple of very good games, but they are, it's a year later, and they've got that experience in their belt. I think.
And a year later in college football is a lot more different than a year later in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I want to bring this up. Y'all bring some fantastic points, but the one thing I want to add to this, and maybe this kind of goes into a question, is what would give you the indication that Greg Schiano is ready to give up on his DNA and his blood? And what I mean by that is his DNA and blood is built off running the football, ground and pound. Why would Schiano all of a sudden go away from that? And I understand, Gabe, how you mentioned how he has 3 really good wide receivers, the best maybe he's had in a long time, or maybe the best he's ever had. Possibly depends on potential play.
At least since 06.
Mm-hmm. And kind of here's where the question folds in. Why would he want to just give that up? Because all of a sudden, Rutgers has got 3 new weapons to play with. They came to Rutgers to play in the system, correct? So why would he change to the players?
I was going to say, it's interesting because when we had DT on the show, he mentioned that Schiano was the number one reason why he came here. And Schiano, his pitch he said that Schiano's good at developing wide receivers. And I want to agree because of Kenny Britt, because of, what's his name? I forget his name for some reason, but from an 09 Sanu. Because of Sanu, we just saw 2 receivers become UDFAs in the NFL. But with that being said, it's always been run first. So I don't know. I hope that DT and Schiano are on the same page with that. And, I do hope that DT is player 1 when it comes to weapons on the field.
Well, the one thing I'll add is that I think that a great coach has to adapt. You have to adapt to the talent that you have. Like Nick Saban typically was a run first, pound the ball coach. But when he had Tua Tagovailoa, when he had Bryce Young, when he had those great quarterbacks, he exploited their talent. So you have to adapt your offense to the talent you have. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I think that Schiano is going to stick with his traditional run first offense and emphasize physicality. And the reason I think so is because he does not have the talent, nor has he really had the talent at quarterback to do what Saban did at Alabama with his quarterbacks, 2 of whom were Heisman winners. So I think what that leads to is he goes back to, a run first offense, but Cali Kamanis is good enough that he can integrate the passing game a bit more substantially, but I still think it's a run first offense.
If it's run first, I hope it's run first with at least CJ and Raymond, and it's not just CJ.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add this too, guys, and these are all great points, and I want to add this. Who's to say Schiano isn't going to incorporate more passing than he has in years? Like, we don't know yet, but what we do know is maybe he, like you mentioned, Adam, how you said DT and Schiano see eye to eye. That's why he came to Rutgers, for Coach Schiano. So maybe Schiano told him, hey, we're going to be a run-first offense, but guess what? That's going to open up more opportunities and more chances for you to make big plays for us. And I feel like when that happens, you develop a great receiver who can block and become versatile. Look at a guy like Puka Nacua, who's in a run-first offense, and look how valuable he is for the Rams now. There is value in having a run-block receiver, a receiver who can be a threat in the passing game, and maybe that's what Shiano's goal is, to teach him to run block first and then to be a pass.
Yeah, and I think the ideal is to have
DT
balance.
is a pass guy, though. He's not really a blocker.
Yeah, and I think the ideal is ultimately to have balance. And I think this year presents a unique opportunity because I think, Ethan has developed. We have 3 good running backs. We've got some great receivers, especially, DT is one of them. So this kind of reminds me of those New York Giants teams in like 1990, when they won the Super Bowl. Phil Simms was not, John Elway, but he was very, very good. And I kind of see Ethan being like that, very, very good. And the Giants had some great running backs back then, O.J. Anderson, Joe Morris. And they had balance that was complemented by a great defense. So I think that's the formula. Can they get to the level where that formula enables them to defeat, teams that traditionally would be above their pay grade, like Penn State? My hope is that they get one. They get one and break through this year.
And the thing is, right, Phil Simms, you mentioned he wasn't John Elway, but he limited his mistakes. And with Ethan, he's on the right trajectory. But this is the year where if he can get something like 5 interceptions, 6 or less, that would be phenomenal. That would be like possibly wins.
Well, if I'm a defense facing Ethan, I'm bringing the pressure all day because what I've seen him do is make mistakes under pressure because he's trying to consistently make a play even when the play is not there or a very low percentage play. If he cleans that up, then I think that'll, that's going to be important. But whether he does that, we'll see. And we're going to see that against Iowa. That's why Iowa's so important because they're going to bring the heat.
It's the first real test.
And I want to say this too, guys. I want to add one more thing to this topic, and that's red zone offense. Red zone offense and defense. I think that could be something that Rutgers could have to overcome because in games like Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, if you're kicking field goals, that's asking to get beat. Like Minnesota, Iowa, if you're kicking field goals, you might be able to get away with it. So for me, my question is, how do you think Rutgers could get over that hump? Because there was times in this year where they were kicking the field goals instead of punching it in, and it cost them some of those games. Like the Illinois game, they had it a couple different times. They had, I think, a turnover, and then they kicked the field goal, and ultimately it led to their downfall in that game. I know, Gabe, you're tired of hearing that, but do you think that's going to be something very important to overcome?
I think we're not kicking many field goals this year, even in games where we don't need to go for it. I think we're going for it. Anytime we're in the red zone and it's 4th and 5 or closer, I really think we're going for it almost every time. And that's simply because of the fact that, like I said, we have 3 different kickers for 3 different kicking positions. That does not bode well with a consistent special teams. So you look at that, that's probably our biggest weakness. But we have a diverse offense. So I really believe that that's the key, right? Not just against the big 3 schools we're facing, but against the Washingtons, the Minnesotas, the Illinois. That's what the key is, the Iowa.
Yeah, I think that's important. But I think, first of all, I'm not impressed with our field goal kicker. But regardless of that, I think it comes down to, once again, in-game play calling. So in the red zone, what are you scheming up? Okay. I think that Rutgers in the red zone is going to have to run the ball into the end zone because a good defense is going to take away our top 2 wideouts. And they're going to pressure Callie Kamanis. When that happens, it's a recipe for mistakes and for field goals. So I think it's going to come down to, with 3 good running backs, pound that ball, and that offensive line is going to need to step up.
See, I think Ethan.
I totally agree with that comment.
Yeah, I think Ethan is going to totally limit his mental mistakes. But what I do see being an issue is, yes, he can scramble, but he has a tendency to stay in the pocket too long and not recognize his blind side. That's why Ty Needham is going to be so important because, like I said, a lot of those rushers are going to be coming around the left side. And, Ethan, I don't know. It just seems like he stands around in the pocket. He doesn't move his feet enough when he's still looking to pass. When he can run the ball, sure, perfect. But I just think that he needs to limit the fumbles, the strip sacks, if you will.
Well, and it's very hard to drop back in the red zone, especially from the 10-yard line in, and throw a touchdown pass. It's very hard. They've got to be able to sustain drives in the red zone, and they've got to wear down the defense. And I think Jason with the exception of the Nebraska game, we're not going to be passing our way into a high red zone touchdown percentage. And with 3 good running backs, it's going to depend on the offensive line. That's going to make the difference.
I mean, don't get it twisted. Like, DT's average yards per reception is, if we're looking for big plays, it's got to be close to 20.
Yeah, but DT, I think, is going to be at his best. I don't say he's not going to be good in the red zone, but his big playability is going to be, when we have the ball on the 27-yard line and the yards after catch. But in the red zone, it's a much different calculus, I think.
So what I want to say to that is I was watching one of your all's games last year. I forget which one it was, but Ethan made a really nice play. But if he wouldn't have overthrown it, I don't know if he got a little overzealous. I believe it was the Washington game, now that I remember. So he scrambled to his left, and nobody was even near him, and the receiver went on like a I guess a corner, a Texas route, and Ethan just overthrew him in the end zone. And that's one of the things, to add to your point, I was like, oh, you had all the time in the world, Ethan, set your feet. I know you're fearing for your blind side, but if you set your feet, he's open, it's a touchdown. And I think that would have made it 21-7 or 21-3 at that point, I believe. But that was one of the examples that you were talking about, Adam.
Well, yeah, and I think, look, if I'm Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Oregon's defensive coordinator, Penn State's defensive coordinator, Washington's, and Rutgers is in the red zone, I'm going to play those receivers man, and I'm going to rush and get on Cali Kamanis very quickly. Because I don't think that we have a receiver like a Jeremiah Smith. So I think that emphasizes. So what happens when, they're putting extra people in the box and playing man? What do you do?
I like KJ Duff as a reception guy. Like, he catches
quick throws, quick drop back, quick throws.
Yeah.
And, maybe some fades, but it's going to come down to in the trenches. It's going to come down to, are we better than the other team or not? And can we run it down their throat? And that's, at the end of the day, no matter how much you scheme, football is a simple game, especially in the red zone.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say this too, Adam, is what you just basically said, man to man. So basically, a lot of coaches say that as they use that as our players are better than yours. Prove it. Prove that you're not better than us. And in the scenario that you gave me, you fear that Rutgers may not have the advantage. Is that what I'm getting from that?
Correct.
So you feel like if they line them up man to man, especially the big three, Rutgers is not going to win.
I think that the odds of Rutgers being successful are about 30%. And so what is
that would be one of the worst in the Big Ten.
I mean, man to man, put seven in the box and try to run on us in the red zone. That's what these teams are going to do.
Yeah.
Or a variation of it. So what's the answer to that? Well, they'll likely be able to shut down the run. So in that situation, what you're going to have happen is the receivers are going to have to win those one-on-one battles. And if they do that, then it makes the defense change its scheme a bit, which opens up the run. So it's going to have to be, whether it's in the trenches or in one-on-one coverage, our man has to be better than their man. And that's the simplicity of it, and that's the challenge they face.
See, I think that you're underestimating the sort of separation that Ian Strong actually could have when it comes to him being wide receiver 3 in a 4 vertical set. He's going to have their third best defensive back on him, and that bodes well for us because Ian Strong, like I said, he's one of those guys that could be a wide receiver 2 on any team, and that's sort of a good separation. And also the fact that DT is going to be lined up on the inside, but he's going to be the speedy guy, and he's got great hands. Those 2 weapons, and KJ Duff does need to have a big year, but when it comes to the 4 vertical sets or the shotgun formations, I really like DT, and I really, really, really like Ian Strong.
I like them in most circumstances, but Ohio State has the depth. Penn State has the depth where I think that they will be able to, present a serious challenge. So what about that? Brings me to tight end. Do we have a tight end that we could throw into this mix?
Colin Weber's a really good blocker.
What about receiving?
Let me look up his numbers last year. I believe he was brought in, like I said, he was top 10 transfer tight end. But I'm not sure. He's from Charlotte. Yeah, he had 21 catches last year, 34 the year before. So it's really his blocking.
So, may I suggest something for a scenario like this? Hypothetically, if we're in Shiano's shoes and we're talking about Rutgers' red zone offense, throw a little motion in the ocean. See if you can't get someone off their balance. Like, you said DT's pretty speedy, right, Gabe? Why don't we throw him – make a little motion in the ocean. Make him as a decoy, eye candy. Do what Sean McVay does. Throw a little eye candy at him. What do you think about that?
I agree with that, and I think it's a good point. But when I think of over the course of a season, having a very good touchdown percentage in the red zone, scheme alone is not going to get us there. What's going to get us there is physicality and winning and just winning those one-on-one matches. And if Rutgers is going to become the kind of team that they envision, that's where you got to win it. You got to win it and be better than the guy you're facing, and that has historically been a problem.
And like you said, Adam, I don't disagree with your philosophy that scheme ain't always everything. But you look at some of these teams that do have a scheme, and teams can't figure them out sometimes. Like Oregon, it took Ohio State the second time around for them to figure out exactly what Oregon was doing. So I think there is a world where it can work. But if you're a team like Rutgers, who is not deprived on talent, but doesn't have Oregon, Penn State level talent, then the schemes might not lend itself to that. So I get your point. It may need to be more simple, basic forward of, okay, just run a post or run a slant instead of doing the motion and then come back and then try to find the miss, that kind of thing.
It's tough to be cute in the red zone. Definitely on some, if you're down 7, by all means, if it's 3rd and 6, try one of those plays. But in the red zone, you really need to do what works best for you and what's been working in practice. And that's why it's an obstacle. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's why it's an obstacle. And that's why Adam brought up scheming, and that's why you brought up scheming, right? Because you need to translate what's working in practice into game. And
I would also say this when it comes down to red zone scoring. At the end of the day, it's relative. It's not what your percentage is generally over the year. It's, can you beat the other team in that specific game? So if our red zone percentage is not great against Iowa, but our defense is, holding them to a lower percentage, we win. So it really is going to come down to those individual play calls. And, a lot of that is going to depend on not just the offense, but on the defense and how the defense is doing and what it necessitates in the red zone from us.
Mm-hmm. And we always hear this too. It's a lot of times, a lot of coaches will say, we didn't score enough touchdowns. We kicked too many field goals. We hear it all the time. I know as a Louisville fan, we had a couple games a couple years ago where it was like 15-10. We won, but we kicked way too many field goals. But our defense was just good enough to win that game. And that's one thing about it. If Rutgers is kicking field goals against Iowa, I think y'all can win. Because I think your defense can handle Iowa's offense. No offense to any Iowa fans or Minnesota. But if you're playing Ohio State, yes. But if you're playing –
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if you're playing Penn State kicking field goals, it don't matter how many times Drew Howard throws it to the other team, Adam. It ain't going to matter.
Yeah.
And Jason is right that we need touchdowns in the red zone. And what I'll say about field goals in the red zone for us, that's not a given. I saw our kicker miss some horrible field goals last year.
I was just going to say that. How many of those are we going to miss?
Yeah, those are always the toughest ones.
That's what analytics doesn't bring into account half the time is percentages. Because you look at like 85 to 90%, oh, what's the big deal? But in college, the range of percentages is so vast that analytics can't decipher when you should kick it and when you shouldn't. That's why it really comes down to coaching and opponent. And that's really why I'm preaching. Like, we have to go for it almost every time unless we think it's impossible. Like, we have to take that Dan Campbell approach when it comes to
yeah. Yeah, and that could bite you in the butt too. I mean, for the Lions it worked out great, but for Rutgers it might not. I hope for your and Adam's sake it does.
For Rutgers this year, it's going to come down to what I said. You win by beating the other team. Yeah, Rutgers is going to score touchdowns if they beat the guys that they're facing, and it means it's very simple. You're going to have to win the play. You're going to have to out-physical them. And you know what? There's no magic to it. There's no analytics. You got to kick their ass. And can you do it? I'll tell you, against Nebraska last year, that defensive line manhandled us. So how good is Rutgers going to be? They're going to be as good as their ability when it matters to win the fight.
Yeah, they were the corn and we were the corn.
Yeah. And it showed, I think, who was tougher too. And Adam, I know you always say this as my parting word here. It's all about where's the beef. Well, guess what? Rutgers' beef was not there. Nebraska was the tougher, more physical team, and it showed. And Rutgers should have taken that personally. That's another thing. Not to go down another rabbit hole, but they got to take that more personally because that should have been a slap in the face to Coach Schiano. How dare Nebraska think they're tougher than us?
Yeah. How dare they stop our star running back, Monangai, 3 straight times? He must have been mortified at the offensive line. But they didn't win. They didn't win. They didn't win the fight. They lost the game. They got to win the fight this year.
Mm-hmm. And Gabe, congratulations on the Knicks, by the way. The great win.
Thank you. The Pacers in 5 prediction is still accurately possible.
Yes, but the only real winner here is Adam, because Adam's gonna be the winner regardless.
Thank you.
Why would you say that? Because he doesn't have to have a heart attack every time the Knicks go down 20.
Yes, and Adam is still going to be here, and Gabe, we might be having a funeral for you, and we'll pay beautiful respects. We'll make it orange and blue skies. We'll make sure there's scarlet red in there, and Adam will sing a beautiful.
You have
only Knicks are the death of me. You can forget it. If the Knicks are the death of me, you better paint that thing Brooklyn black and white.
Gabe,
oh, jeez.
You did this to yourself. You put yourself in this position, and now you can't complain.
Look, Adam, New Yorkers do not choose their teams choose them.
That's true, and that's why I'll always be a Yankees fan.
Not that I am necessarily envying the Nets, but I have been cursed with being a Knicks fan.
Well, this year, there's a lot to be proud of. Even if they don't win it all, there's a lot to be proud of.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say this too. I'm looking forward to what y'all have coming up here on the Rutgers channel. Looking forward to the season. Hopefully Rutgers has a nice, wonderful season. Adam doesn't have to take his blood pressure medicine, and he could just have a nice cold soda after a nice Rutgers victory.
Austin, is the Knicks season going to be alive on by next week's show?
if the Knicks play like they did last night, and show some toughness and show some heart, this might go the full 7. I might retract my Knicks Pacers in 5.
Hopefully, I really just hope that the Knicks are still in the 2025 season come next week's show. But until then, not the Meadowlands, but Jersey, anywhere but Jersey. Jersey
used to be the Brendan Byrne Arena.
And I'll say this too, Gabe. I think we're destined for a Knicks Timberwolves finals. Unfortunately for you,
so beautiful. I know I said I don't want to root I don't want to root against the Timberwolves, but that I would love that, especially not have to face the Thunder in that scenario.
Are the Timberwolves out?
No, it's down 2-1. Just like the Knicks.
It could happen. We could see Julius Randle Knicks reunion. It could very well happen.
What I want to see in Game 4, Gabe, I want to see John Starks come out and redeem himself for the terrible game against Houston. I believe it was in '95. We need Starks.
It's funny. John Starks attends like every single Knicks game, and every time they show him on camera or like in the arena, I always think it's Tiger Woods.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he looks just like Tiger Woods.
Wow, he had a great career. It was just that bad game.
Yeah. Him and Patrick Ewing, unfortunately, had the Chris Webber like careers where they excelled, but they're known as chokers.
The Michigan Fab Five never won.
Shout out.
And Adam, I got to say this. We need Carmelo Anthony to start hot, too, for the Knicks. Don't forget that. John Starks needs to do his part, but Carmelo needs to come to play because I'm tired of Carmelo just sitting over there collecting a bill. Come on, Gabe.
No, but seeing Melo, J.R. Smith, and Stoudemire on the bench celebrating three-pointers, I love it.
Yeah, but appreciate y'all as always. It's always fun. Go Rutgers, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day. And Gabe, for you, go Knicks tomorrow.
Thanks
and you too, Adam.
Thanks so much. I always appreciate you calling in. Great conversation, and we'll see you next week. Have
Thank
a great
you, Austin. Adios.
All right, that's Austin. Always great hearing from Austin. Great points, great conversation. And that's going to wrap up our show for today. If you like the show, hit that like and subscribe button. Thanks also to Jason O and everybody in the comments section. Gabe, any final thoughts?
I love seeing the new faces. Jason O, the Alchemist, everyone that contributed. Thank you guys for joining. I hope the Knicks are still around next week so that I can anxiously await their next game. And I can feel the season coming. It's approaching quick, and I'm very excited because win or lose, it is still chop Scarlet Knights.
It's going to be an exciting season. Can't wait for it to start. We'll be back here, as always, every Monday at 7 p.m. and live as news develops. So thanks to everyone for being here. Go Scarlet Knights, and we'll see you next week.
Go Scarlet Knights. Like and subscribe.